Mario Brothers 3. Horror story, null. Story presentation, pretty good. We'll talk about that. Core gameplay, we'll get back to that. Gameplay presentation, we'll get back to that. I guess core gameplay would be good, and gameplay presentation would be null. Sorry. Let me explain. Because we didn't actually review Mario 3. We reviewed Mario Advance 4, aka the GBA version of Mario 3. So in that case, I could give the gameplay presentation a very firm thumbs down. The GBA version is wrong. But you're probably expecting more details from me about that, and I don't have them because we never figured out the specifics. Forgive me for summarizing. We spent literal hours, both on camera and off, testing the original NES version, testing the emulation version on the Switch. We tested the SNES version of All-Stars. We tested, of course, the GBA version. I even pulled out my DS, specifically for the purposes of putting in my actual GBA cartridge to figure out what the hell was going on. There was something wrong with the GBA version. It was so wrong and so bad, I was hating it. The controls were off, the landing was off. Every single aspect of the game was just like a couple of frames in the wrong direction, and it was hard to properly process. And so I was dying all over the place and game overing constantly and mulching my way through these things. I bothered to get the 100-something lives just so I could actually push through the game. And that's really, really frustrating. Naturally, being me, I assumed the problem was with me. This pauses for all of you to be able to go and say, no, it's just you, Lore. But with all of the other versions we tried, all of the other versions just played smoother, played better. No issues, no problems. Maybe it's just because I'm used to the original, because the SNES version is barely different from the NES version. In fact, some of you probably remember, the very first Chimera runs we ever actually did were of Mario 3 and Mario 3, NES and SNES respectively. But no, it was fine. It was Mario 3, it was fun, it was cool, no issues. So what the hell is going on with Mario Advance? And again, I don't know. We have a few theories. Maybe the timing is just a few frames off. Maybe the rendering is a bit too stuttery, which is causing issues with visibility. Obviously, the shrunk screen is a problem, but we did specific stage-to-stage tests. I actually showed you that picture last time. And most of the stages are identical, or they did something they forgot to do back in Mario 2 Advance, and they actually bothered to change the stage round to accommodate the smaller screen. So by all accounts, it should have been fine, and it wasn't, and I don't know why. So I don't recommend playing the Advance version, which is a damned shame. Because A, it's still Mario 3 under the hood, and B, and perhaps more importantly, it has several small but critical quality of life features that make it better in every way. The most important one, obviously there's the World Select and the fact that you can replay stages, that's cool. But the most important one is it has a freaking save feature to the stage. This is the first one. The SNES version has a save per world. The NES version has no save feature whatsoever. But the GBA version allows you to just save wherever, as if you were just saving a normal game. So if you're on 3-1, and you're like, or no, 3-5, and you're like, hang on, save. Come back to it a week later, guess what? You're on 3-5. There's a couple other little features, I don't want to bore you with all of them. The point being, that was nice. And yet the game played like ass. I was challenged to beat 8-2 without any kind of P-Wing or power-up, so I had to do it as small. Now, on the SNES version, I did that second try and also third try to prove that it wasn't a glitch. On the GBA version, it took me something like 60 lives to do that. I don't know how else to explain that, really. But you're here to talk about Mario 3, of course, which is a damn shame because I have a whole bunch of behind-the-scenes information that I will not be sharing with you about it, because all that's at the beginning of the stream. I always put that behind-the-scenes stuff at the very beginning of the stream if you don't want to watch the rest of it. So, that's over there. It was certainly a hell of an event. I, of course, have my own personal stories related to it as well. But we're here to talk about the game itself, and this is definitely a game that is the first Mario game. For those of you who have been following the show for a while, we know we have a concept called the first game. A first game isn't necessarily limited to games, where it's not really like the rest of the franchise. But, well, no, maybe it's like the rest of the franchise. Let me walk that back. It's not that good is the way I want to explain that. It's a little rough, little jank, few issues, unpolished, and it's generally what would normally be called a bad game, but almost always on the execution factor here. So down, thumbs up here, thumbs down here. But the core gameplay is usually good. You can see the nugget or kernel of quality within. Assassin's Creed 1 is a good example of this. God of War 1 would be another good example of this. I'm sure there's others. I suppose Warcraft 2 would qualify. It's almost always the first time a particular developer sits down and makes a type of game. So it can be a game relatively far into the franchise. For example, Dragon Age Inquisition, the third Dragon Age game, is a first game. Because it was a fairly large staff, a decent number of people who were new, and were working with an engine they never worked before, trying to overhaul the entire series for the purposes of going forward. So, first game, right? Make sense? But the Establisher as a concept we only really codified this year. The Establisher is the first game in a franchise which is the most like the franchise. It's when the franchise got established. Mario 1 is the first Mario, and Zelda 1 is the first Zelda, and Mega Man 1 is the first Mega Man, but none of those really established the franchise. That would be Final Fantasy IV, Zelda 3, and Mega Man 2, respectively. All of those are the games that actually were like, this is what we're going to be when it comes to insert franchise name here. And the reason I bring all that up is, of course, because of the fact that Mario 3 is the establisher for the Mario franchise. This is what established what Mario would be, up to and including, I would say at the very least, New Super Mario Bros. U, which is the most recent Mario game we've covered to date. We're actually starting Mario Wonder today, by the way. All of the precepts and concepts of the way they do the overworld, the way they do the stage design, the power-ups, all that stuff. But even like the more philosophical or thematic things. I mentioned I'd bring up the story thing again. How many of you have ever noticed the story of Mario 3? Now, most people, when they hear the word story, what they hear is the word plot. But I use the word story to involve the entire umbrella of all the things that make up a story, which can be a whole lot of things. Visual, audio, background noise, lore, world building, all that fun stuff. I gotta talk about the 6 points of story, of which only one is plot. The story of Mario 3 is interesting because you go through a bunch of worlds, most of whom are primarily like the worlds they're in. Grass levels, desert levels, water levels, etc. Most of them are very thematic to the zone, which is good, and helps to add to some visual flair and some enjoyment that some of the later games missed. But also, in almost every case, the enemy are either locals, usually specific to the island, or not what you would refer to as non-military types until you get to the airship. There are a few exceptions, but they vary based on specific locations. And then you get to World 7. World 7 is interesting because it has biomes from every other world, which makes sense. It's the world that connects. It's the underworld, right? It's the warp zone that's connecting between all the other worlds. That's what the pipes have always done since Mario 1. So, World 7 has bits of desert and bits of water, and you get it. Okay, cool. Then you get to World 8. And World 8 is fascinating because on the very outermost edges is the military, the actual armed forces of Bowser's minions. Once you go past that, then you start going through his lands, the actual terrain that is the native people of the Darkland. Then you go through one last fortress, and then you actually reach his castle. And I know that's a relatively small thing and a minor thing, but the visuals and the presentation of the stages and the order they're in can form that kind of narrative flow, and I don't think I ever really properly processed until this particular playthrough how much of a story is present in Mario 3. And I'm not even talking about the theatrical thing. Let's just leave that at the door. Interesting to think about. And of course, the game is awesome. The individual levels. One of the things... So I mentioned how in Mario 1 they were inventing level design. And in Mario 2, they were trying to extend what the hardware could do. Really with the vertical thing, especially. Now, there was certainly some hardware pushing with regards to Mario 3, even in the original NES version. But... Or I should say, especially on the NES version. But Mario 3 was really trying to just zoom in the camera on individual stage design, which has been the hallmark of Mario ever since. The idea and design around making each stage its own particular theme. Not just a visual theme, but a theme of how it's presented. This stage is a chain chomp stage with a bunch of piranha plants. This stage is a bunch of fire jets. This stage has enemies that will attack you in arcs. This stage has enemies that will attack you from above. That's what I mean by theme, gameplay themes. which is something that smarter people than me have talked about at length. And that's all over the place in Mario 3, and you can tell they really went over with a fine-tooth comb over each stage, like, okay, yeah, sure. And that does make Mario 3 a damned good game. Even though, it didn't particularly score that well. I mean, I shouldn't say it that way. What I actually mean by that is relative to the rest of the franchise. So, like, Mario 3, the actual Mario 3, where is it? Of course I can't find it here. Did I not even write it down? Of course I didn't. Why would I write it down? I'm tired. What do you want from me? Let's just do it this way. Let's just do it this way. Mario Brothers 3 got... Oh, it is right there. 65.441, which is a pretty good score. Mario Advance got a 59, which is pretty good, and got negatives for whatever the hell was going on with that score with the controls. But 65 in the current system is above average. That's a good score. But I imagine most people would say that this is one of the best games of all time, and that just gets down to the whole coffee, tea, and soda thing again. Because if you look at, say, Mario World, which got 113, or New Wii, which got 106, or New U, which got 258, or Galaxy 1, which got 206, or Galaxy 2, which got 187, or 3D World, which got 246, or Yoshi's Island, which got 290, you see why I say it's not widely amongst the giants of the others. But just like a remix cannot be a remix unless the original song exists, even if the remix is superior to the original song, those later games would not have existed if not for Mario Bros. 3. Mario 3 is the establisher. However basic or simple, good or bad it is, doesn't really matter in the final equation, because what matters is how much it launched the franchise into the era that it would eventually develop into. Just like so many other franchises. So let's go play some Mario Wonder. See you next time.